Good afternoon, everybody. This is Sterling from CART, and thanks for joining us today, and welcome for the real-time insights about Amazon Prime at Whole Foods. I'm super excited for everything that we have to get into today, and thanks to Sense360 for sponsoring us putting this thing together. Now, a couple quick housekeeping things as we get started. This is GoToWebinar. I know many of you have used it before. If you haven't, you likely see a control panel that pops up on your screen. And it's in that control panel, you're able to ask questions and chat if you're having any technical issues or you have some commentary for our panelists. And I'd certainly encourage you to do that. We'll have some time for Q&A towards the end. On August 28th, 2017, it's a date I don't think any grocers, any retailers are ever going to forget. It's the day that Amazon purchased Whole Foods in a transaction valued over $13.7 billion. Few saw it coming. We've certainly all seen the impact. We've all seen the news, and it marked, really for the first time, at least at this scale on no uncertain terms, that online was coming together with in-store, and retailers had to excel no matter the channel. Amazon's a company that spent over $23 billion on research and development last year. To give you some perspective, that sum is larger than Dollar General's entire market cap. It's larger than the market cap of Marriott International, the hotel chain. I mean, it's the entire GDP of countries like Cyprus and Honduras. Just a massive amount of money they're putting into R&D. And a lot of that they use combined with acquisitions just to power massive growth. Amazon generated $60.5 billion in revenue last quarter, which is up 38% from last year. They're now nearly a $1 trillion company, catching up with Apple, and the growth is driven by data. Data and more data. It's all about the data, especially data from their loyalty program, Amazon Prime. Oftentimes, just now known as Prime, right? They don't even call it Amazon Prime in many channels. It's just Prime. And the benefits that it offers, if you're not familiar, are things like membership discounts, free shipping, eligible purchases, and streaming of movies, TV shows, music, all for, I think it is $119 a year. So it is a paid membership. It's estimated that there are about 80 million Prime members in the US, which is about 25% of this country. And Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, came out personally earlier this year and said that there's over 100 million Prime members in the world. Now today, we're going to get to see how that Prime program is actually playing out in brick and mortar, how it's playing out at Whole Foods. We're going to first get into how we collected the data, how we made sense of it, how the Sense360 platform works. We're then going to get into the true impact of Prime at Whole Foods before finally looking at the competition and the actual impact they're seeing as a result of all of this. And we're going to do it all in about 45 minutes, so we have plenty of time for Q&A towards the end for those of you joining us today. And we'll end at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Now again, my name's Sterling Hawkins, and I'm a fifth-generation retailer and co-founder of CART. I'm looking at over 1,000 new companies every year and speaking at different conferences around the world about the results. It's really an honor and a pleasure to have all of our panelists with us today, and just give me a second to introduce them. Gary Hawkins, my co-founder at CART and our CEO. Gary's been a career retailer, loyalty pioneer, and father of personalized marketing, having written several books and is a regular speaker on the subject. Welcome, Gary.
Thanks, Sterling. Great to be with everybody.
We also have Anne-Marie Stephen, CEO and founder of Qualia. Anne-Marie is a recognized thought leader, speaker, 2018 Woman to Watch, having had clients such as Pepsi, Hershey, Ahold, and many others. Welcome, Anne-Marie.
Hi, Sterling. Hi, everyone.
And finally, we have Ellie Portnoy, CEO and founder of Sense360, a thought leader and innovator in his own right. He's founded previous companies, formerly worked at Amazon, and is a mentor at a number of incubators and accelerators and investment groups, including Techstars, Amplify LA, and Muckler Labs. Welcome, Ellie.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
So let's dive right in with you, Ellie, to kind of set the stage. Why don't you share with us the methodology you use to collect the data and how it all worked?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sterling. So I have a lot of data to share with you today, but before we dive in, I thought it would be helpful if I gave a super fast summary of our methodology so that you know where the data comes from and how we collect it. I'll keep it brief so we can spend almost all of our time on the data and the takeaways. So where do we get our data from? It starts with a partnership with almost 100 different apps that include our code in their application. If the user consents, we provide the app with analytics and monetization, and we get to anonymize the sensor data we get back. What this means is that our technology is on millions of devices in the United States, and we get full sensor data from them. There are multiple benefits of this approach. Our panel comes from a highly diverse set of apps, which means we have a highly representative view of the US population. We control exactly how we collect this data from the phones, which leads to higher accuracy. And most importantly, we get to see the full journey of all the places people go to, thanks to the GPS and other sensors on the phone. And this allows us to fully understand what people do in the real world. How many times have they been to Whole Foods or Trader Joe's or to a C-store or to a restaurant or even to the gym? And this data helps us understand the what. But we can also trigger surveys to our users based on where they have been. This helps us collect the why. And we ask questions like, why did you go and how was your experience? These surveys gives us the color and the context. And the combination of the behavioral data from the sensors and the survey data gives us this unparalleled 360-degree view of what consumers do and why. Which means that for every visit from one of our panelists, we're getting a ton of information. As an example, when someone goes to Whole Foods, we know that they went to Whole Foods, but we also know what was nearby that they chose not to go to. We know whether they had been to any one of the nearby alternatives. We know if they had been to a Whole Foods before, and that lets us understand if they're a new guest or an existing guest, a high-frequency guest or a low-frequency guest. We know where they started their journey and how far they traveled to get there. We know how far from work it was. We know their arrival time and the duration of the visit. And thanks to the survey data, we also know the reason for the visit, the experience attributes, and a lot more. And we collect this data for over 100 million restaurant visits a year, over 50 million grocery and C-store visits a year, and over 300,000 surveys a year. And to put the amount of data we collect in context, the map you see is actually not a map, but a black background on which we overlaid a single day's worth of data. And you can see just how much level of detail we have, the granularity, the fidelity of this map, which is not even a map, it's just one day of data. Even at the very local level, our data creates this high fidelity view of the United States. And the net result of all of this data and the technology we built to collect it is that we have incredibly accurate data. We've done validations dozens of times where we compare foot traffic data from our customers to our visit data, and the correlation is well above 0.9 a day. So that's the very quick overview of how we get our data. Now you know where it's coming from.
Great. So cool, Ellie. Thank you. Now, let's talk a little bit about Amazon's acquisition of Whole Foods. And I think the first question really is, well, why did Amazon get into the grocery business? Gary, what are your kind of initial thoughts around that? Why is that where they started?
Well, I think it's pretty straightforward. Quite simply, everyone eats, right? Everyone needs food. So we've got a massive industry that Amazon can access. And it's also a massive industry that has been ripe for disruption, right? There has been largely, quite honestly, little innovation or little disruptive innovation that's occurred in the industry for decades. And that was just a big, big target for Amazon here. Secondly, as you mentioned earlier, Sterling, it's all about data for Amazon. And data provided by shoppers purchasing food, be it in store, be it online and elsewhere, provide enormous insights into other shopper behavior that Amazon can then leverage into growing other parts of their business. And lastly, is there is a convergence happening between food and healthcare. And, we only need to look at their acquisition of PillPack right now. So, a lot of things are coming together here, driving Amazon's push into grocery.
Great. And Anne-Marie, do you see it the same way?
Yeah, it's a great opportunity to learn a business, right? So if we look at the grocery space, I'll echo some of Gary's comments in that, it's a frequent purchase, right? So from a transaction perspective, grocery is something that we do, consumers do once or twice a week at minimum, right? So that's something we're going to do with quite a lot of regularity. Second, Whole Foods was particularly appealing, I think, for two reasons. One, maybe three. One is demographic overlap, right? So this is really in their sweet spot. So about 81% of the customers that shop at Whole Foods were already Amazon Prime. Were already Amazon customers, and about 50%, about half of those customers that were also Prime members. So, it really was directly correlated to their business. I think second is that it's sort of a small footprint when you look at the grocery space. It's an opportunity in tech world. We always say, fail fast, right? They're a tech company. So to really learn a business, they acquired one, right? They acquired a brick and mortar business. They can start with 450 stores rather than looking at some of the competitors in the space and other grocery parts of the space, which are thousands of stores, right? And then also Whole Foods is a national chain, right? So that allows them to have 450 new distribution points across the United States. It allows them to expand their reach and expand their offering of even refrigerated product, and then bringing the whole food product onto the e-commerce site. So I think there's just a load of advantages for Amazon in this space.
Yeah, for sure. I'm hearing both your answers that it was a smart step. And Ellie, from your side, having looked at some of the data, what's your take on it?
Yeah, so I think the answers from Gary and Anne-Marie are spot on, and they're fascinating and definitely contribute to how I could see Amazon having gone through the acquisition and thinking through the acquisition. I'd like to suggest that I build a little bit on some of the answers. And one of the things that I always look for or look to when trying to understand Amazon's motivation are some of the quotes that Jeff Bezos is giving out, because he's pretty transparent about his strategy. And one of the things that he said that I think is really at the core and at the heart of the strategy to buy Whole Foods is that he wants to make it so compelling to be a Prime member that it is irresponsible not to be one. If someone is a Prime member, they buy more stuff. Everyone knows that. And so the more he can make Prime compelling, the more he locks people into the Amazon ecosystem, and the more they buy. So Prime is this really important part of Amazon's strategy, and I think that starts getting at the heart of the grocery question. If Amazon wants to make it super compelling to be a Prime member, it makes sense to make those discounts and benefits applicable in everyday categories like grocery. And so by buying a grocer, Amazon has a platform with which he can dole out even more day-to-day benefits to Prime members, making membership even more irresistible. And that's exactly what Amazon did with Whole Foods. As soon as they acquired it, they introduced two benefits for Prime members: Prime deals and then yellow signs for an extra 10% off. So if you shop at Whole Foods, there's now this huge extra reason to become and stay a Prime member. I think the second question, on top of like why get into grocery, is why did Amazon specifically choose Whole Foods? And to answer this, I think we need to dive a little bit deeper into who Whole Food customers are. And the first thing to note about Whole Foods guests is that they, like all grocery shoppers, care a lot about price and value. So prime discounts clearly resonate with Whole Foods shoppers. But outside of price and value, Whole Food guests have very different motivators as compared to the rest of the market. They care a lot more about healthy choices, specific items, and quality. You'll notice for healthy choices, they over-index at 184. For items that they can't buy elsewhere, it's 170. And for a specific item or brand they carry, it's 146. So very, very heavy skews towards these motivators when it comes to Whole Foods versus the rest of the grocery index. And I think this difference in who visits Whole Foods starts getting at the core of why Amazon chose specifically Whole Foods to acquire. They're a totally different type of grocer. But I want us to go deeper to understand who visits Whole Foods with a lot more color. And to do that, we use the power of behavioral data to segment our panel into 10 distinct clusters. And I won't get into the details of the segmentation in the interest of time, but please do reach out if you want to go deeper on the methodology. And I would be glad to go into both what variables we use and also how we validated them. But the outcome are 10 distinct segments, each representing roughly 10% of the total population. As an example, you'll see on the far left, social suburbanites, and they account for about 10.3% of the population. What's crazy about the Whole Foods acquisition is that their segments skew the same way as Amazon's do. They both have the same top skew, urban influencers, where Whole Foods over-indexes in a very dramatic way, and it's also Amazon's top skew. But even more interesting is that Amazon and Whole Foods actually share 4/5 of the same top skews. In other words, Whole Food customers are Amazon customers, and they overlap in a really dramatic way, which I think Anna Marie was talking about earlier. But by far the largest skew for both is these urban influencers. And so I want to go a little bit deeper into who urban influencers are, because they're just such an important segment to Whole Foods, and they're such an important segment to Amazon. So just to tell you a little bit more about who these urban influencers are, I'm a millennial who's began to find my footing in the city. I'm highly educated and paid. I'm very detail-oriented and confident, both in personal and professional life. I love to give advice and recommend products that I like. With my income, I don't shy away from spending and often shop online. But I'll add a little bit more color here. Urban and millennials eat out often, and they use coupons slightly less than the general population. And their top drivers when they go out to eat really revolve around health and nutrition. Urban influencers are also really active. They travel often. They spend a lot of time shopping online, which is obviously not surprising given that we know they're heavy into Amazon, but it also shows up in that it's one of the top 3 apps on their phone. And for an interesting picture and a little bit of color about who they are, we can also see the top apps they skew towards, which include Seamless, OpenTable, and New York Times. And rounding out this view, we can get a sense for their demographics. They're highly educated, high income, skew younger and more female, tend to be single, and are very urban, as they would imply. So now you know a bit more about urban influencers, this one segment that accounts for 10% of the population, but heavily, heavily over-indexes both Amazon and Whole Foods. And you also know that they're basically Whole Foods and Amazon's biggest customers. What's really interesting of this Whole Foods acquisition is that Amazon bought a grocer where they could apply an ad offline and non-digital Prime benefits that would specifically apply to their best customers. And this overlap showed up loud and clear when we surveyed guests who frequent or consider Whole Foods, as they were 25% more likely to use Amazon and 50% more likely to be a Prime user. And similarly, when we looked at behavior, Amazon users were 27% more likely to visit Whole Foods versus people who do not use Amazon.
Great. That's so cool to see. And I'm sure our panel and many of us has certainly checked out Whole Foods and kind of seeing some of the transitions in there. Anne-Marie, in your personal opinion, how's it working?
Thanks for asking, Sterling. I think, what's interesting about it is the appeal to the same demographic, right? So I think it is working in terms of creating stickiness. And it's one of the things I wanted to touch on today for sure was it gets deeper, it creates a deeper relationship with customers that are already using Amazon and Amazon Prime, as was noted at the beginning of this session. What's important about that is it's very, one of the models I love is Apple, right? Apple creates an ecosystem that we tap into, that consumers tap into, and just can't get out of, right? So, once you're a loyal customer, you're in and you own multiple products, right? This is the same thing that Amazon is creating with this consumer. They're appealing to what is their need. They're really keeping that customer at the center of the conversation, which we hear so much about, and they're executing it well, and they're executing it swiftly. Now, what I will say though, it's not every piece of this has gone well. Some of the prices, quality, and inventory management have been questioned. I think it's going to be a matter of them getting a handle on the business. I think there's obvious scalability opportunities, when they're buying in mass and being able to pass those values along to their customers. But certainly it's been driving value for customers in different ways. Even as recent as yesterday, they announced that they'd be doing a pickup in 2 cities. They're piloting it in 2 cities that you can pick up your groceries curbside within 30 minutes, which is really incredible. And I think looking at the speed to market with which they're adopting how the consumer wants to shop is remarkable. I mean, when you think about this brand having been acquired just 12 months ago, I think it's really important to recognize that they are not messing around here and they're moving quickly. And that's a model I think other retailers can benefit from, is really looking at the speed to which new iterations on the business, like a curbside pickup, for example, can and should be integrated into the business to address the customer demand.
For sure. As I was doing some research, and I noticed that the acquisition was less than a year ago, I just couldn't get over the progress that they've made. So it was a point well taken there. And Gary, in your personal opinion, how is it working? I know you've been into some of the stores and you've used the app. Is it working for you?
So, yeah, I think it's absolutely working. I also believe Amazon is just getting started, right? I think the last point that was brought up around sort of speed of innovation here, like their curbside pickup service is a great example of that. Again, this is how Amazon does business, and this is how they are disrupting a very staid and traditional industry. Traditional supermarket retailers simply are not used to moving fast and innovating fast and having to respond so quickly to consumer needs and so on. From what I've seen, I was really impressed with the execution at store level, from signage at the entrance to throughout the store, to education and information to their frontline associates and employees. I think Amazon's done a very good job of conveying the benefits for Prime customers. I also will go on to say that, extending the new deals, discounts, and offers for Prime members is, again, a way Amazon is just getting started. What that is doing is driving shoppers to identify themselves at checkout, right, through either the Whole Foods app or the use of their phone number. That is giving Amazon a fast-growing amount of shopper-identified purchase data. Amazon is then going to take and apply their personalization and marketing relevancy to this vast treasure trove that they're rapidly accumulating, and further deepening that relationship with each shopper through personalization.
Yeah, great. Having used it myself, I was surprised at how easy the process was. Once I downloaded the Whole Foods app, all I had to do was log in with my Prime email and password, and that was it. I was in. Now, Ellie, let's bring it back to some of the data. What does the data show us about their performance to date?
Yeah, absolutely. And now that the acquisition closed a few months ago, we have some data to look at to see how it's been working. And I agree with all of the comments prior, which is the Amazon's execution and speed has been tremendous. And that doesn't mean there haven't been hiccups, but when we kind of like pull back and look at what has this meant for Whole Foods, I think the data shows some pretty interesting impacts. So the first is, in general, Amazon users go to Whole Foods a lot more often. You can see that represented in the pink straight line, which is the average delta between an Amazon user and a non-Amazon user before May 17th. So that's basically the delta between someone who's an Amazon user and someone who's not. An Amazon user was already going to Whole Foods more often, and the average is that pink line. After May 17th, which is when Prime Deals was launched in Florida, the first market, you see that a massive spike represented in that green line, which clearly they were just are going to Whole Foods at a significantly higher rate than non-Amazon users, and that delta has basically doubled since then. So true impact. And this jump in how Amazon users interact with Whole Foods actually had a profound impact on the entire market. People who had at least one visit to the grocery category in the last 6 months increased the rate at which they went to Whole Foods dramatically in May, June, and July, jumping from roughly 4.8% of the total visits in the same period last year to almost 6% this year. So a dramatic jump between the number of people who are going into a grocery store and what percent of them are actually choosing Whole Foods. And as we move further and further from the acquisition and launch of Prime Deals, we'll be able to start looking back at those early users and see if they start coming back. But based on the small sample of initial survey responded, it looks like 90% of Prime members who have tried the Prime Deals are hooked, and they're planning to participate in Prime Deals at Whole Foods again. So 90% of people who told us they participated are planning to participate again. And the only caveat to this is that it's a small sample. So this is directionally true, but it is a small sample, and I just want to call that out. But I think more importantly for the growth of this program is that 81% of Prime members who have not yet participated in the Prime program at Whole Foods said they would consider participating. So there's a ton of upside left for Amazon just in this cross-referral of Amazon users going to Whole Foods because of these additional Prime benefits. And that means that as Amazon rolls this out, we can expect to see visits to Whole Foods from Amazon members increase. They have started to just scratch the surface of the impact, and survey respondents actually told us as much. Out of the 1,000 people we surveyed, 33% said they would likely increase visitation to Whole Foods, and 50% of Prime members said they would. And just as interestingly, the inverse is true as well. 40% of non-members who frequently consider Whole Foods said the Prime program increases their likelihood of joining Prime. And 56% of existing Prime members who consider Whole Foods said the program increases the likelihood that they will retain their membership. So you start to see the cycle where people are going to Whole Foods more often because of the Prime member, and especially Prime members are going to Whole Foods more often. And at the same time, this program is now generating more interest in Prime and getting non-Prime members to start signing up for Prime.
Yeah, that's incredible. They really are getting the virtuous circle flywheel kind of moving there. And I think it was you, Anne-Marie, that was talking a little bit about Apple and how they've kind of built this ecosystem around it. Are some of these results what you expected, at least as soon as you were expecting them, or how do you see it?
I'm glad you asked. I think it's much faster, to be honest. I think it really just speaks to you. I thought there would be more challenges in integrating brick and mortar business for them. And I think we've seen some of that, right? There's some bumps that have been experienced. But I think, you know, between Whole Foods and Amazon had incredible Trust, I think that's one thing we haven't touched on today, but brand trust, brand value, as did Whole Foods. This purchase, this acquisition of Amazon of Whole Foods was largely based on that. It wasn't necessarily the actual value of the business. It was the brand value. So, they've really traded well on that. And I think that, some of the operational challenges they've experienced, like any kind of deployment, I think is to be expected. And I think they're fast learners. It's obvious, but that brand trust is what they already had between the two of them, and executing, the digital pieces of connecting the physical and the digital world just extended into that trust, right? So the customer already knows that they're going to get a great experience. They're going to get here brand value, and they're going to continue to expect more and keep deepening that relationship across their channels. I think it'll be interesting to continue to see how fast and how much they do.
Yeah, it certainly will. And do you think that they'll kind of continue on the trajectory they're on, or do you think some of the benefits, at least in the, let's call it midterm, are going to start to be curbed? Do you think they've exercised a lot of them up front, or the best is yet to come?
Oh, in my opinion, I think there's more to come, right? So they haven't tapped into Amazon Fresh, right? So there's still all of that same day delivery that is not available just generally in all cities with Amazon just yet. So where you can get the delivery within an hour, which I think is really incredible. So they're only going to continue to refine. So keep in mind, yesterday they did the curbside pickup, for the, I would think suburban locations. I'm in an urban location, right? So for me in an urban location, I want, that 30-minute, delivery within an hour can be very appealing, right? So now as they can expand those types of programs within the organization, I really think there's still a lot of work to be done. I mean, again, they've only acquired it, less than a year ago. So it's really, there's a lot to be done, and it's very exciting for them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting to see where they're headed with some of it. And Gary, same question for you. What you expected? Is it more than you expected? Less? Where did that land for you?
No, I think they are doing everything I expected them to do. Mm-hmm. I think we're still very early on in this. I think there's a much, much bigger play here that Amazon is also after than we're seeing yet. When you consider that there's somewhere around 80 million Prime households in the U.S. and only 20 or 25 million of them shop at Whole Foods, mm-hmm. and then you consider Whole Foods only has 400 and so physical store locations across the U.S. Compare that to Walmart with 4,000 to 5,000 store locations in the U.S. Kroger, the biggest supermarket company, with somewhere around 2,500 to 3,000 locations. And then consider what Amazon is doing, and this hasn't gotten a lot of notice in the news yet, but it is absolutely a big push for them, is taking Whole Foods private label products and making those shelf-stable products available to any customer across the U.S., right? So products that can be, Whole Foods private label crackers, cookies, detergent, whatever it may be, boxed up and shipped to anyone in the U.S. That effort has already been underway from some number of months. Mm-hmm. Even in its first couple of weeks, was already generating some millions of dollars of sales of Whole Foods private label products. So there's a big opportunity that Amazon's going after to make Whole Foods national in presence without necessarily having to, multiply store count tenfold.
Right. Yeah, really leveraging the online and offline. And what do you think their future looks like, at least as far as the Prime program goes? Right now, and I think we said this, but it makes sense to say it again, that for certain items, Prime members get 10% off in Whole Foods. Do you think they'll continue with that? Or
so they'll continue with some level of what I think of as sort of mass promotion. Mm-hmm. Or mass benefits for Prime members to continue to drive Prime memberships and drive more and more Prime members in Whole Foods markets into the store. But as they begin collecting more and more shopper data on each Prime member's specific purchases, they're going to leverage that into personalization and what I think of as strategic personalization to drive greater frequency, even more purchases, and really lock that shopper in.
Yeah. Yeah. In the competition.
Can I jump in on that too?
Yeah.
I was just going to jump on that too. And that's just on those, that data, right? So we have whatever they're doing on Amazon, also whatever their behavior is, maybe in the bookstores, in the physical stores of Whole Foods, on the, what they're doing on the Amazon site. Are they using media, entertainment, you name it. So that becomes a massive data pool. So I just wanted to jump in on that, which is pretty powerful.
Yeah, so Anne-Marie, I'll bolster that. Great point, and I'll, I think we can drive that home even more to the audience. You step back and look at the purchase data Amazon is now accumulating across a massive number of American households, not only across, their traditional online platform, but now adding to it grocery purchases, and very quickly adding to that more and more prescription data. What Amazon is assembling in terms of data and specific data to a specific customer and household is really unbelievable. They will have more data, more insights than any other entity I'm aware of.
Yeah, it's incredible to watch. And there's certainly an impact on their competition. Right? Basically everybody else, and really supermarkets, especially. And Ellie, I know you guys pulled some information around that. So what does this mean for the rest of, let's just look at the grocery industry. Is this something we need to be paying attention to now, or what's the impact been?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think just generally, anytime Amazon enters your space, you should be very, very worried because they're such an exceptional executor. They execute at such a high level, and they use, like we just said, data to make very, very informed decisions. But I think what's so powerful about this acquisition and what we've been seeing in the data is just how much of a flywheel they've created, where they're creating more Prime member, they're increasing those Prime members' visits to Whole Foods, and that's creating this cycle that's going to be very, very hard to compete with. It's a really, really killer formula that's essentially decimated the e-commerce space, and now all of a sudden they've taken that formula and brought it to the offline space, where they brought it to the grocery category. And so we wanted to understand, well, how much of an impact is this having on competitors? How worried should the industry be? And I guess the short answer is very. But to bring this point a little bit more home and use data to show it, we did an exploration of Trader Joe's traffic. And we picked Trader Joe's specifically because 36% of Trader Joe's guests also visit Whole Foods. So there's a lot of overlap between these two brands, and we thought it would be a good one to start off with, to just give you a sense for how Whole Foods and Amazon are impacting Trader Joe's business. And so Trader Joe's also have very similar consumer interests as Whole Foods, over-indexing in guests who care about health and quality. This looks a lot like the slide we showed earlier, kind of showing how Whole Foods guests tend to be different than the rest of the category. Well, Trader Joe's kind of fits the same model and the same preferences and motivations. And the other thing that's interesting about Trader Joe's is that they tend to have the same two segments as Amazon and Whole Foods. So urban was we wanted to better understand the impact on Trader Joe's. So what happened when Whole Foods was acquired by Amazon? And to do this, what we did is we looked at instances when there was a Whole Food and a Trader Joe's within 1 mile of each other. And so they're both really close to each other, and the consumer is essentially making a choice, not based on distance, not based on convenience, but basically a true choice of who do I want to visit. And we looked to see what % of people who visit Trader Joe's or Whole Foods decided to go to one or the other. And in 2017, Whole Foods captured 51% of the visits, and Trader Joe's captured 49% of the visits. So almost dead even split. If someone was close to both of them, they were basically choosing them equally with a slightly higher preference to Whole Foods. Fast forward to today, fast forward to since May 17th, when the Prime deals went out, and it's just one slide prior, Sterling, that number jumps to 53%. So when Whole Foods and Trader Joe's are within 1 mile of each other, 53% of the time people are choosing Whole Foods, and 47% of the time they're going to Trader Joe's. And a 2% jump might not feel super meaningful, but it actually is amazingly meaningful, because what it means is that when the option to go to either and both are nearby, more than 4% of Trader Joe's customers are switching and going from Trader Joe's to Whole Foods. So 4% of customers that were initially choosing Trader Joe's, because of the changes in the market this year since the Prime deal, have switched and are now going to Whole Foods, which is really material. And for a quick view of the broader market, we ran this head-to-head analysis where we looked at instances where Whole Foods and a competitor were within 1 mile of each other, and we did this analysis for a bunch of other retailers. And unfortunately for the market, Whole Foods gains are not limited to Trader Joe's. They've actually increased market share when in close proximity of almost all its national competitors in grocery market, including mass merchandisers, drug and dollar stores, which basically means that they've created this draw around Whole Foods that's pretty much unparalleled in affecting everything. So when you ask me, like, should competitors be worried? The answer is absolutely, because even in the early days, even just 1 year post-acquisition, we're already starting to see the massive impact it's having on retailers and how much consumers are thinking about these Prime deals and these benefits that come with their Prime membership. And so my conclusions are that Amazon is a highly formidable competitor that now has an unfair advantage in the cycle that they have created between Prime Amazon and Whole Foods. And this cycle is going to perpetuate itself and is going to create meaningful challenges for the category that the category really needs to be aware of and understand and figure out how to combat.
That's great, Ali. Thank you. Some super interesting numbers there. And Gary, as you know, someone that's been on the forefront of loyalty and everything that's happening with customer data and the pervasiveness of data that Amazon has across, many touch points we all have, how do other retailers compete with this?
So Amazon is continuously raising the bar for competitors, right? And I have long believed that traditional retailers need data, and particularly shopper identified data, if they're going to play. And Amazon is only reinforcing that notion, right? So I think that leaves companies like a Kroger well positioned, because Kroger, for example, has been one of the leaders in collecting and understanding and using that kind of shopper level data. But far too many retailers, including some very large, very well-known regional retailers, let alone smaller ones, aren't there. And they aren't even close to having that kind of data and shopper understanding, right? Retailers need to understand that it is no longer about, who's got the best price on Cheerios on the front page. It is about understanding that specific shopper and what their needs are, what their preferences are, how often they purchase things, and many other insights from them, and then marketing to them individually. That's what Amazon is capable of doing, and doing far, far more effectively than any other retailer, given the breadth of their data capture.
Yeah, I mean, we've never really seen anything quite like this. This is an entirely new kind of entity, almost, where they're a technology player, they're an e-commerce player, they're in store, they're really covering everything.
Yes.
So, Anne-Marie, what does this all mean to you? I mean, you're working with all kinds of different retailers and front and center in a lot of that technology conversation. How are you talking with retailers about how they compete and how they deal with some of these things?
It's about, I'm going to go back to the ecosystem, right? I think we can't think of our traditional brick and mortar as being the delivery point. And to Gary's point, it's really not about the transaction. That's one piece of the puzzle. What Amazon is offering their consumer is something much bigger and something much broader. I think the, value piece or the incentivized piece is, one piece of the puzzle, but, what makes it more attractive and more appealing are some of these other value points, right? So, obviously the access to media entertainment, but really, delivery, speed, the speed to which I can get my products and services to me, those kinds of things. So I think ecosystems not only include the digital world and those kind of service items you can attach to that, right? We're hearing this across all kinds of retail. It's not exclusive to grocery, it's not exclusive to apparel or traditional, department stores. It's across all kinds of retail and brand, is that it's multiple touch points, physical, digital, mobile. So we have a kind of an access, full 24/7 access to that consumer across their physical and digital environments, right? Which is not an easy problem to solve, but certainly really looks at where the consumer is accessing them at the time and the place and where they're at and how they're living their lives. So, and that talks to the data that's driving all of that, right? So where are they? What are they doing? What are their preferences? And really getting sticky and creating those significant relationships with your brand that live beyond transaction. We are no longer in a transaction-driven world, no matter what business you're in. It's what value are you providing, right? How are you creating an ecosystem would be the questions that I would ask for your consumer. And in some worlds, they would call that a community. What community are you creating for those shoppers and those consumers and those customers? And I think from a B2B side, and that's sort of the customer-driven side, I think there's some really interesting things that data will start to drive. One thing that I thought would evolve, and actually I thought it would be a little more quick to evolve, we have dynamic pricing, right? So sometimes prices go up. We see this in the, in the share economy, right? In our Uber and Lyft world, we have, in the hotel room pricing wars, when there's hot demand, prices go up, right? Mm-hmm. So I think we see that in the grocery segment. But the other piece is what we're going to get to is what I would call dynamic loyalty, right? So who are the most valuable customers? And we're going to be able to start and offering things maybe they wouldn't buy, rather than offering them discounts on things they already buy. And data is going to drive us to those opportunities to create, I would say, depth, increased basket size, increased transaction size.
For sure. Yeah. It all comes back to the data. And we've got a bunch of questions from some of the folks in attendance with us today. But first, Ellie, data is your business, right? Really understanding these metrics and how Amazon or all competition might be playing a role in a retailer's business. How do you work with companies so that they can understand what that impact is, whether it's Amazon or somebody else?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And I think it goes back to what Gary said, which is that at the end of the day, in this new world, data is going to win. When I worked at Amazon, there wasn't a single decision we made. It didn't matter whether it was a pixel on a screen or an email we sent out that wasn't based on data that we knew and understood that drove that decision. And that was such an incredibly big competitive advantage in how we operated. And part of what we're seeing in our evaluation of this Amazon Whole Foods acquisition is that Amazon is again using data, and they're bringing that data to the offline world, and they're working with Whole Foods to figure out how to pull data back. And all of a sudden, you've got this data monster, and the only way to compete against data is with data, because data, at the end of the day, what it tells you is how to make better decisions. And ultimately, what I believe to be true in business is that people who make better decisions ultimately win. And so what we try to do is help basically businesses, whether they be a Whole Foods, a Trader Joe's, or a Kroger's, whether it be a Coffee Bean or a Jack in the Box, use data to make smarter decisions. So as an example, one of the things that we'd be very happy to do is look at anyone's brand and help them understand what has the impact of this acquisition been on their business. It's kind of like what we just did for Trader Joe's, but we can do that for pretty much any business. And then the next step is to say, okay, well, based on the impact we've seen, what can we find? What are the opportunities? How do we make sure we're not just competing against Amazon in their own game, but using data to find the opportunities and the way to win, the rate to retain customers and ultimately grow them. So from my perspective, the reason I started this company is because I saw how Amazon uses data, and I believe there's a way to take data and empower businesses to make better decisions across everything they do. And I think what's happening with Whole Foods is one example of why data is becoming so critical in this world.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Ali's been kind enough to share his email with us. So if there are specific questions or things you want to get into around how this can work for your business, I certainly encourage you to email him. And we'll get into a couple of questions now. Anne-Marie, first one for you. So there's some other pieces to this puzzle. One specifically is Instacart. How do you see Instacart's going to play into Whole Foods' future, or is it part of their future at all?
You know, it's a great question. I think Instacart has the opportunity, that's a great question. I think they have an opportunity. I think really where the opportunity is for the other retailers to be leveraging that, that type of solution. So, again, it's moving closer and faster to those consumers. What is the way that I'm going to get there, right? So if we can do how do I get the product into that consumer's hands in the quickest, fastest time that I can do that, right? So I think definitely there's an opportunity for any kind of delivery service, and that whether a retailer is growing it in-house or whether they are looking to a third party in this case, this is where it's going. So I think, but growing something in-house though too takes time. So I would almost look to a third party who's already got the process down. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. And it's going to be interesting to see how that shapes out. I would have said before the whole acquisition that Whole Foods would be a natural to kind of get deeper with Instacart, maybe even acquire it at some point. So we'll see where that goes. A little bit different direction now with you, Gary. How do you think this is going to impact more traditional retailers like a Kroger, Safeway, Albertsons, those kinds of guys? Because when we're looking at Whole Foods and Trader Joe's, they're, in their own category. They're doing some very special things. Do you see an impact on some of the more traditional pieces?
So absolutely. I think that impact will be less, Sterling, as you just mentioned, at more, let's call them niche retailers like a Trader Joe's, that really have a niche focus and a very clear experience what they're trying to do. I think more mainstream brick and mortar retailers are very much at risk of this. As we're seeing in some of the data here today, Amazon is becoming more and more effective at driving sales through Whole Foods. As they take Whole Foods private label, shelf-stable products online, is also going to start cutting into share of wallet from other brick and mortar retailers. The way I look at the industry is really sort of in three groups. I position or think of Amazon as sort of the digital deity, right? That is just got its fingers in everything and is pulling all these pieces together to really transform and disrupt the industry. Then you've got who I think of as digital disciples. Companies like a Kroger and a Walmart are spending, millions, tens of millions, billions of dollars each year simply trying to keep pace with what Amazon is doing and their pace of innovation. This innovation arms race has really gone nuclear just in the last few months, as we've seen Kroger do a deal with Ocado to build automated distribution centers here in the U.S., and then the deal with Nuvo to use self-driving automated vehicles to deliver those e-commerce orders. The problem is every other retailer, short of those, simply doesn't have the resources to play this game. It's really going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But I think in summary, I would say that, within the next 5 years, I think it may even happen faster than that. We are going to see a very significant restructuring of this entire industry. I recently did a call with one of the big banks, analyst groups around technology and the web and grocery, and it's clear that everyone is expecting a significant transformation here. We're going to see this industry change in a big, big way.
Yeah, it's exciting times. And this next question is a great one, right? Because the data alone is not enough. And Elliot, I think this question makes most sense for you. How do you take the data and then move it into recommendations? Do you give recommendations yourself, or how do you work with companies to really make the insights they can gain from your platform actionable?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are a few different ways. And the first is, I think most executives have hypotheses, ideas they have about ways that they can go and influence their business and impact their business and grow their business. But a lot of times, 2/3 of their ideas will be right and 1/3 won't be right. And that's actually a super high percentage. And that means that they're an incredibly astute and intuitive executive. But spending 1/3 of your efforts and resources on something that's not going to work is just not going to cut it in a world with competitors like Amazon and when there's zero margin for error. So what data can do is it can help you validate those hypotheses much, much quicker before you actually put them out, or even once you put them out, be able to very quickly realize and recognize what's working and what's not. I think the second thing, or the second way that data can really help, is it can help you identify opportunities. And the way it can do that is by getting a lot deeper into not just what are people buying when they come in, but who are they? Where else are they going? How do you matter in relation to their overall journey? How are they interfacing with these competitors? Which helps you identify gaps in the market, opportunities, places where you can go head to head and start winning and taking share. And so it really starts uncovering things that can be done. And then the third thing I think it does is it gives you a measurement tool. It gives you a way to, in very granular, real-time manner, be able to understand what's working and what's not working and where you need to be iterating, because Amazon is iterating on a second-by-second basis. And so the days of being able to get trackers and other data on a 3-month or 6-month or 12-month lag, it just doesn't cut it anymore. You need to be able to get this data quickly so that you can react fast. And so those are the 3 ways that I think data can help any retailer, any CPG company, basically anyone trying to play in this space, make sure they're making the right decisions and ultimately getting to the right growth.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I've got a bunch of other questions here, which we can certainly follow up with. And again, this webcast has been recorded, so we'll make that available to everybody and make sure we're in communication by email, social media, and so on to get those things answered, and so you can get the recordings. As that's just about all the time we have for today. That went fast. So thank you all very much for your time, your interest here with us. It's really been great being with you. And I also want to thank Allie, Gary, and Anne-Marie once again for being with us. It's been just such a pleasure walking through the data with you and getting into some of the implications. I think we all learned something today, right? There's a lot of data in there to take a look at. And one of my favorite quotes is by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. It's a mouthful, I know, but he said, "Knowing is not enough. We must apply. Willing is not enough. We must do." And just as we were saying a few minutes ago, Ellie, it's the next steps that we take that makes the difference, not the insight alone. And I really look forward to being part of that with you guys. And all that there is to do is we take some of these actions. And so reach out to Ellie to get your hands around some of the data. Reach out to us to understand what are the technologies and tools that can implement some of these things. And certainly reach out to your community, your share groups, your customers, as well. At the end of the day, just as it's always been, it's about serving them. So join us for our next webcast on the personalized wellness blind spot, where we'll explore the obvious but little supported connection between healthcare and food. That'll be on August 23rd at 11 a.m. Pacific. You can find us all online at advancingretail.org and stay connected with the latest and greatest happening in retail technology at Advancing Retail on all the social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, even Instagram. If it's social, well, we're probably on it. So I look forward to being in touch there. And until we talk again, it's been great being with you once again. Enjoy what's left of the summer. And thank you for joining us.